Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's devotion. Thank you to Lorraine for asking me to speak on the faithfulness of God. Psalm 89 is a psalm that holds God's faithfulness as a central anchoring theme. Ethan the Ezrahite begins this contemplative psalm saying, "I will sing of the mercies of the Lord forever. With my mouth will I make known your faithfulness to all generations." Ethan considers God's mighty work in creation, how the heavens declare God's works, his faithfulness, his greatness, and how God's faithfulness is declared in the congregation of the saints. Ethan also considers the promises of the Lord to Israel, how David, his servant, would be anointed and exalted. God would show faithfulness and mercy to him, and he would give him a throne that would be established, that his seed would endure. The Lord promises that if his people would forsake him, he would visit their transgressions with judgment. He would allow them to be punished for their sins, and yet he wouldn't utterly forsake his covenant. He wouldn't break it. He wouldn't fail to be faithful. However, when Ethan looked at his own generation, he said, "You have made void the covenant of your servant. You have profaned this crown by casting it to the ground." Whenever Ethan looked around, all he could see was the wrath of God in an unfaithful generation. How could the Lord be faithful to his promise whenever people were being unfaithful? So Ethan calls upon the Lord to remember his words, remember his promises, turn away from his wrath, and see how he carried the reproach of the people. Ethan said, "Remember, Lord, the reproach of your servants, how I do bear in my bosom the reproach of all the mighty people," which is another way of saying, Lord, I bear in my heart the shame of my people. I bear the shame that our enemies have reproached us with. And then he concludes with blessing. Ethan was able to proclaim the goodness and faithfulness of the Lord in his generation because he remembered the promises of the Lord. He could call upon the Lord to remember because he himself remembered the words that the Lord had spoken. It's easy to look at people around us, to see the unfaithfulness of our generation, to see the unfaithfulness of other people, or to look at our own sin, our own failures, and think that God can not be faithful to his covenant, that surely his promises will fail. And yet we can take encouragement from this psalm, knowing that God will be faithful. He won't cast aside his covenant with us, but we too in our own generation can proclaim his faithfulness. Even as Ethan wrote these words, the Lord already had a plan to establish his faithful covenant, his faithful promise to the house of David in the person of Jesus Christ. So be encouraged today in the Lord's faithfulness, in spite of the way that societies, communities, and we as individuals fail. God will always be faithful to his covenantal promises.